I want to look at frailty and fitness in older age. It's relevant to us all. That frail title on the left was a project I was involved in 2014 with Manchester University, which is called Fragility and Inequality in Later Life. It's talking about the inequalities between well-off older people and those who aren't. And it was a real eye-opener to me, real eye-opener. So I'll just go through it and then we can talk about it. Do you remember Shakespeare's As You Like It? The 7 ages of man? The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. That's increasingly relevant nowadays with pouches you might actually be carrying. Anyway, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank. And there's a picture from one of the illustrations of As You Like It, 7 Ages of Man, second childishness. So anyway, what is frailty? It's increased vulnerability of older adults to catastrophic declines in health and resilience. And I'll come on to what clear definition a bit later. Frail older adults are at higher risk for disability, falls, institutionalization, hospitalization, and mortality. What are the symptoms? Weakness, slowness, reduced activity levels, low energy, exhaustion, and unintended weight loss. Well, I seem to be going around with a lot of those, except the unintended weight loss. I don't know what others. And the prevalence, it's not as much as you think in terms of the official definitions of frailty. Up to the age of 69, it's only 4% of older people, and from 85 onward, it's many more. So what are the indicators? Weight loss, exhaustion, slow gait, how you walk, weak grip strength, and low energy expenditure. This is a very interesting one, the famous walking test. Have you heard of this, anybody, the walking test?
No.
It's a quarter of a mile, 400 meters, whether you can walk that distance in 5 minutes. And for each minute that it takes you beyond 5 minutes, the risk in the next 4 years of dying increases by 33%, having a heart attack by 20%, and have a disability by 50%. So that's quite cheering, isn't it?
Yeah, do you really want to know?
Laughs on a Sunday, Bernard.
Do you really want to know that?
Cheerful Charlie.
It'll get better. So the risk of frailty obviously increases with age, and it becomes increasingly dramatic from the age of 70. But the good point about it is, and from taking part in that study, which is based on something called ELSA, which I'll take you on to in a minute, it is possible to recover from frailty, though this is more likely for the most well-off. So that's the important influence of socioeconomic position. This was the frail study I was involved in, and it was based on something called the ELSA, which is the English Longitudinal Study of Aging, which sociologists like myself, kind of Monkey, it's unique in the world, but 18,000 people have taken part since 2002, with them being re-interviewed every 2 years as they get older. So it's a fantastic resource in terms of information about what goes on with people's health. So as I'm 75, this is a bit ominous, frailty generally kicks in at the age of 75 plus. And this is a kind of summary of it. All 100-year-old people are frail. Most 90-year-olds are frail, and some 80-year-olds are frail. Also, interestingly, a lot of it can be about your attitude to it and your positive views about aging. And those with those positive views apparently lived an average of someone's got a bit of a cold there, an average of 7.6 years longer than those of a similar age who didn't hold such views. And when people think about whether genetics is about it, whether you had good genes, and apparently only 3% of how long you live compared to the average person can be explained how long your parents lived. So it doesn't seem to be a hugely important factor. So accepting the stereotypes of old age can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what does it say? I can't read that down at the bottom. I managed to cover it up myself. Can you read it? You deliberately putting yourself at risk by growing older, something like that. It says anyway.
By being over 65.
Thank you. For some reason, mine's covered over on that one. So there are 11 million people aged 65 or over in the UK, over a third of whom live alone. So 1 in every 5 people is age 65 plus. And those are the general life expectancies, 79, 83. And those haven't changed for quite a few years now. It seems to have leveled off, the increase in life expectancy. And in some groups has actually declined. And there are 3.2 million aged 80 plus, of whom 600,000 are aged 90 plus. And of course, as well as that, it's the quality of the life years that you've got left. At the age of 65, men can expect 8.9 years, 9.8 years for women, expect to have 9 years in good health, about half of their remaining lifespan. And there are 1 million people with dementia expected by 2025, a third of them living in residential homes. So these are, if you want to check off your own age against this.
No.
So look at me. I've got an expected to live for a further 12 years at the age of 75, 6 years at 85, and 3 years at 95. And for women, it's slightly higher, as you can see, an extra year, effectively, except it levels off at the 95. Men eventually get, if they get that far, they've got equal opportunity of living to 3 years then. Also, about women aged 65 plus, 32% overweight, 34% obese. Men aged 65 plus, 54% overweight, and 31% obese. And only 7% take the minimum levels of physical activity necessary to achieve health benefits. Again, I thought I was getting more cheerful. I don't seem to be. Has anybody heard of the word sarcopenia? It's the other aspect to bone loss density. It's the degenerative loss of muscle mass, and it declines at an average rate of 3% per annum after 60. By our 70s, we've lost up to 40% of our strength, though we can do something about it with strength training and adequate diets. And of course, this together with the loss of bone density makes you vulnerable to falls, which of course is one of the biggest dangers as you get older.
Oh dear.
It's a great photo, that one, isn't it?
One way to stop a bus.
Yes, it is. So exercise resistance training, you know, things that you do with bands and things like that, can increase muscle strength and help prevent sarcopenia. It's good for resisting obesity, diabetes, and so forth. There's no segment of the population that can benefit more from exercise training than the elderly. So I think we're a very unusual group. I think we're the elders who I've come to, by and large, been a very healthy group. So these are the various ages. Round about half of our older lifespan can be, you know, can be in good health. And though you are liable to get and this statistic at the end is the interesting one. We are incredibly big consumers of the National Health Service. 2/3 of NHS clients are aged 65 and over. I suppose in some ways you'd expect that. The younger you are, the healthier you are, and therefore the less likely you are to use these things. Now, there's something called the Rockwood Frailty Index, which sums up deficits and expresses them as a proportion of the total. And they've got 62 of these that they use and the various things like that, cardiovascular, depression, pure eyesight, and so forth. And the interesting thing about and this is a clinical frailty test, which goes from 1, very fit, to number 9, terminally ill. And the the ones, so from you get from mildly frail, moderately frail, severely frail, and very severely frail, and then terminally ill. So those are the different, instead of the 7 ages of man, there are the nine scale of clinical frailty. And something I just want to show you, if I can escape from this for a moment, try playing this, and I'll explain what it is. Now, in 2014, when I was on this study, one of the foremost researchers on frailty, a Canadian called Professor Rockwood, visited, and I managed to get him to go to Chorlton Good Neighbours to give a talk. And this is just a couple of minutes from it, just to give a flavour of it.
I'm going to say, everyone, put your hand up right now, please. You can take your hand down if you're younger. Not yet. Wait for it. Take your hand down if you're younger than 70. Take your hand down if you're younger than 80. Take your hand down if you're younger than 90. Okay, so everybody here, they're older than 90. Is that right? Sorry, older than 90. Good. And there's a good number of you. So there's many more of you here out of the group than you would expect there to be on average. And that's good. Everybody, as they get older, here's a comforting thought, everybody, as they get older, is more likely to die. But not everybody of the same age has the same risk of dying. Some people are fit and some people are frail. And I'm interested to know why that is. So, yeah, it's a very cheery idea. So I'm very interested to know why this, because as a doctor, when I'm looking after someone, it's important for me to understand how fit or frail they were before they got sick. Because every person, when they get sick, they're never at their best. So it's important for me to understand what are they like when they're at their best, which for most people is what are they like 2 weeks before they got sick. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to measure that. Table coaches, eyes and ears. An excellent question. The question is, do genes play a role in life expectancy? And the answer is, yes, they do, but not that much. So I always say to people that one of the things that if you want to have a long life, it's important to choose your parents wisely. But after that, and that only accounts for about 25% of it, most of it is down to how you live your life. And the best way is to do what your mother told you. Do things in moderation and exercise. Everything in moderation.
So I thought that was rather a coup, getting the world experts on frailty to talk. And we got people filling in questionnaires about it and a new methodology that they were using as well. So anyway, that's what they're trying to do, to get people to work out who are the people who are frail and therefore most at risk before they go into a crisis, because you don't know how frail they are. It could be for all sorts of reasons that people don't. Now this is quite a difficult curve, but this is one from the ELSA. Each of those lines is a cohort, a 2-year cohort. But the black lines are from the poorest individuals, that the top 20, would it be 20% of poor, the ones who are most poor, and the red lines are the richest 20% of the cohort that they were studying. And the frailty cutoff, which you can see here, is the poorer ones tend to get into frailty round about that time, whereas the richer ones about 10 years later. So there is a big difference based on inequality. So talking about falls and hip fractures, and this is something, well, it's begun to concern me more because I definitely feel more fragile than I have. And I find my balance is less good than it used to be. I find the state of pavements atrocious.
Absolutely.
And something I never really thought about very much, but when you're in fear of tripping up, You take it very seriously indeed. Anyway.
And I did.
You didn't you? Yes, recently. Yes. Well done.
About 18 months ago, I fell just on my road, just outside of my house practically. And that was a bad pavement. It was a trip. I didn't faint or anything like that. I tripped over a bad pavement, and my glasses dug into my forehead, and I was bleeding, and I was so shaken up. I reckon it took me ages to get over that fall because I was frightened. You know.
Well done, as you'll see from these statistics. So 9 out of 10 hip fractures are for older people. That's obvious. More common in women. They have twice as likely to have a nasty fall, one which leads to consequences, than men. Do you think of any reason why that might be the case? Women just walk more, perhaps?
Wearing.
Pardon? What was
might have been shoes that they're wearing, partly.
Sorry, was somebody else say something? Was it Maureen? Were you saying?
I just said shoes, maybe.
Yeah. Yes, I said shoes as well.
It's also when I had that fall on the way to, if you're looking in your handbag or carrying heavy shopping, you can't stop yourself.
No,
because you haven't got a hand to stop yourself with, and that's been the times when I've had a fall.
Yeah,
Well,
I think the major reason is osteoporosis.
Oh, well, that's once you've fallen, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was saying falls that have consequences.
Osteoporosis.
Osteoporosis is one, because it's if you've got weaker bones and your muscles are getting weaker as well, you've got less strength to protect yourself in the fall, and when you do fall, your bones are more likely to break.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there are about 60 to 76,000 hip fractures every year in the UK, which is a lot. And that 95% are caused by falling, usually by falling sideways. I don't really know what that means. Falling sideways, you're more likely to fall forwards and backwards than you are sideways, because that's the way you kind of tilt yourself, isn't it?
Well, if you fall sideways, you land on your hip, don't you?
Oh, right.
Yes,
that's where the... Yes.
Just to say something about this.
Go on.
I've been going to Pilates since about November last year, really, because of a back issue. But one of the things I really struggle with at Pilates is balance. Yeah. Any of the exercises that ask me to balance, I really find difficult. And the physiotherapist that runs the session, she said that it's the most crucial thing with regard to falls, that you work on your balance. And we do things like, just simple things like standing on your tiptoes and trying to get your balance. And you can put your hand against the wall just to support you if it's that difficult, because it's very difficult for people. Even lying on my side, when we sort of lie on the mat on your side, it's very hard to maintain your balance. And so that's something that's quite important with falls. I just thought I'd mention that.
It is absolutely, you're quite right.
Yes, that's a good point.
I am getting better at it.
Well, that's the thing. If you do something about it,
you need to practice.
You can improve. That's almost, some things are like with me, I've got polio in my leg and I can't do anything about that. It's just there. So I have to work around it. And everybody's got different things like that they need to work with. Not everybody's got every part of their body in reasonable shape, whatever that means. Anyway, but apparently after a major fall like these, the ones we recorded, the hip fractures, only 1 in 3 sufferers return to their former levels of independence. 1 in 3 ends up moving into long-term care and the mortality rate at 1 year post hip fracture is approximately 30% of all hip fractures.
Gosh.
It's a really startling statistic, startling statistic. So what can you do? Exercise is obviously the key one as well, that Lorraine was talking about, to specifically improve various things like that. And one woman gave a very good example in an exercise class at Good Neighbours, when she said, well, I wasn't able to move my arms above my shoulders until I started exercising. And that means now I can get stuff from the higher shelves rather than having to use a stool. And you can see that's a much safer way of doing something, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just little things like that. And also some of your medicines can sometimes cause dizziness or sleepiness as well, which is one thing. Apparently taking vitamin D is very important. Getting screened for osteoporosis. Do strength and balance exercises, is what Lorraine's talking about. Have your eyes checked. And then obviously making your home safer. You know, there's the obvious one of curled up rugs that we trip over, but lighting, grab bars, rails. And I'd put another one that a lot of older people are very reluctant to do, which is to use a walking stick. With a walking stick, you've always got 2 points on the ground.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
It really, you know, I started using one fairly early in older age and it makes you feel somehow that by using a walking stick, you're degrading yourself or something. There's something about it. A lot of old people just will not accept.
Well, can I just interfere for a moment? My husband didn't want to use a walking stick, and he was 8 years older than me. And I said to him in the end, well, just look at it as if it's a third leg. Now that might sound rather silly, but it is. It's a third leg. Well, I don't think he actually appreciated it when I said it, but
no, so it doesn't always work, that does it? No, to sort of saying. No.
But anyway, I wish he was still here. He's not.
No, I did notice when I first started using it, people treated you slightly differently. They treat you more likely to treat you as if you're older. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's what I felt at the time anyway. But yeah, certainly making your home safer is a good one. And
yes.
the problem of that, of course, is stairs, which we all have, and very difficult.
Yes.
My daughter once said to me that she'd been reading that one of the most common reasons people fall is putting on trousers. Because they tried to put trousers on standing up, or standing at the top of the stairs, or put them on in a rush, and apparently trousers are a big cause.
I can see that.
Yeah, I can
for everybody, not just the elderly. So just worth a thought. Sit down to put your pants on.
But going back to standard stair lifts, we installed one for my mother. And she said it was the best thing that ever happened to her.
Oh, I can imagine.
Because she lived on her own, and she wasn't, she was fairly active, but getting up and downstairs was a problem to the point. And she didn't have a downstairs loo either. So she would sort of, not drink because she couldn't get to the loo that easily. And when we put it in, it just made such a difference. Just carrying things downstairs, if you forgot glasses or a book or washing or whatever. And she used to do a kind of Mary Poppins impersonation if she felt in the mood. And it's it struck me that anything that can make the life simpler and easier is worth doing. And she had grab bars in the bathroom and her friend said, "Oh, I would never do that. It'd make me feel old." And her friend fell and ended up in a home, just like we were talking about here, because she didn't have those kind of things in place. So anything that makes your life easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Irrespective of what anybody says or does.
You're quite right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
I agree.
I'll get a standard stair lift fitted next week.
Okay, we'll come around and inaugurate it for you. Yeah, we'll have a party.
Standard lift party. The point that this study was doing, which I think is interesting, that there's much higher levels of frailty for poorer people compared to the richest. I mean, it's just very true, isn't it? And there's similarly with life expectancy as well. It starts at age 70 for people in the poorer groups and age closer to 80 for richer people. And it's different life expectancies, all sorts of reasons why that's the case. But poverty, like anything else, inequality, like anything else, leads to fewer chances and more risks. So they question in that study whether the golden generation label applied to the baby boomers, of which most of us are members, I imagine, is not really accurate. So for the more affluent, life after retirement is likely to be one of less stress and greater health opportunity. However, for the rest, it comprises relatively fewer years, poorer health, fewer resources, and greater constraint to social, cultural, and civic participation. And finally, effective policy responses to the challenge of population aging should not be seen in isolation from the need to address social, economic, and health inequalities in later life, which I think is very true. But just in terms of life expectancy, I was looking at Manchester's, because there's a huge difference between places like Kensington and Kensington in London compared with, I think it's Blackpool. There's something like I think it's about a 20%, a 20-year difference in life expectancy. I looked in Manchester. I just looked up the statistics in Manchester. The life expectancy for a male born in Miles Platting is 72 years. For somebody born in Disbury, it's 82 years. There's a 10 years distinction.
Really?
Wow.
Chorlton's a bit behind 80. But I mean that people are dying because of inequality for all sorts of reasons, but dying much earlier than they should do because the lack of life chances that they've had. I think that is the end of that, yes.
Very good. Interesting.
Well, I think it's something we should look at occasionally and remind, there's no point just sort of going on about how dreadful everything is, I suppose, but it's, it really made me think when I was in that study, because I saw this category of people who in one cohort were frail, and then in the next time they were interviewed, they'd moved into the non-frail, so they de-frailed themselves. And I thought, well, that's optimistic. You can do something about it, which is why I rather obsessively go swimming most days.
I wonder in a few years how the impact of the NHS GP no longer, sorry, I'm not getting my words out right, but they've stopped reviewing 70-year-olds in GP practices. And you just wonder a few years down the line what difference that might make, really.
Yeah.
If we feel good in our psyche, our body is going to feel better because
I agree with that.
Sure, there are physicalities, just like a car. All the systems that are going, the vascular system, the lymph systems, and so on. They get clogged up. But if we don't move, if we think, oh well, I'm old. Let me give you an example, just very, very quickly. When I finished one of the chemo sessions, I went outside, sat on a bench because it was a nice evening. It wasn't, and this lady came along with 2 sticks and sat down beside me. And she said, "Oh, I'm feeling really old today." And I said that, you're not old. It's your body that's old. And she sat and she thought, and she said, "You know what? That makes me feel a lot better to think like that. That it's the thing that I exist in." Anyway, I'm not going to go on about it, but that's just a point of view.
Derek.
Yeah, just 2 points. I mean, Lorraine's absolutely right. Loads of things that we used to have in the health service now are going, and right now, not in the future. Basic things that we've come to expect are not there. Face-to-face consultations, investigations we used to have. So I mean, the cover-up of 10 years of underfunding the NHS has gone on throughout COVID and on, and I think it will be a big issue for the future. And the other thing is, relating to what Bill says, is it's a very individual journey. I've had 3 serious falls, but all of that was to do with, like Bernard, I'm very physically active, but I'm actually in some respects in my head, I'm not an old person at all. I rush about too much, and the you know, the three sort of serious falls I had were all my fucking fault. Excuse me. You know, you know, and they in two of the cases they had serious consequences, because when it came to my radiotherapy, I couldn't get the choice that I wanted, you know, during my cancer treatment, because they couldn't give me a general anesthetic, and I had a more widespread. They had a thing which had arrow darts, you know, that were like very accurate, and I wanted to have that, but because I banged my head into an iron plate, you know, funny enough, running to visit someone at MRI, I went straight into a plate.
Anyway, Derek, we're in the last minute.
Have an anaesthetic. You know, more serious side effects from my radiotherapy as a consequence of that. You know, like you couldn't. So, but most of the time, I'm like you. I do as much exercise. I want to be the fittest I can be, even at this age. You know.
Okay, well, thanks. Oh, yeah, Anne, but I think you might be